Yesterday, while I was at work, Ava came up to me and casually announced that she would be going on a date with her colleague. Yep, a date. I'm Nathan, 32, and I have been married to Ava, 33, for almost 7 years. We've always lived a relatively quiet life. No kids by choice, and we were content, well, at least I thought we were. Things started to feel different a few months ago when Ava began mentioning that her life felt stagnant, like she was stuck in a dull loop. She hinted that having a child might break this rut. I suggested that we could talk about it, even though it hadn't been in our plans. But after 1 or 2 discussions, she shrugged it off, calling it a passing thought. I brushed it off too, thinking it was just some fleeting anxiety or a phase. I should have known it was the beginning of something much darker. And then came yesterday, the day when she simply said, "I'm going on a date tonight." I was confused at first, assuming it had to be a joke. I chuckled, expecting her to laugh with me, but her eyes were dead serious, lips pursed. She was not joking. "What do you mean, a date?" I asked, my voice shaking with a mix of confusion and disbelief. She explained it was with Eric, her colleague, just to shake things up a bit and make life exciting. Exciting. I could hardly believe what she was saying. I stared at her, hoping that she'd realize the absurdity, but she just gave me that dismissive smile, the same one she uses when she talks about mundane things like buying groceries. Ava explained how Eric was having similar feelings of stagnation in his life, and they had connected over their shared frustration. She swore it was just dinner, and what did she call it? A date. A date. As if it was nothing more than 2 friends catching up over coffee. When I demanded to know why she had to call it that, she insisted on being transparent with me. Transparent. The word made me want to throw up. Before I could get a word in, she brushed me off with a kiss on the forehead, turned around, and walked away to get ready. She left me there on the couch, stunned. I watched her put on that scarlet dress, her favorite, and a sudden wave of helplessness washed over me. My thoughts raced in panic, disbelief. What was happening to my life? I called my best friend Kevin for some beers. I told him about my colleague who was having marital problems, too ashamed to admit it was my own wife. He said maybe it was just a harmless night out, but I knew better. Deep down, I knew this was the start of something I could never take back. Ava returned home earlier than I expected, around 9:30. There was a forced smile on her face, her lipstick smudged, her eyes restless. She hugged me and whispered, "It's so exciting, Nathan. Just what I needed." She had the audacity to tell me that they were already planning a weekend trip together. A weekend trip. The air inside my chest felt like poison. Anger choked my words, but I just stared at her. Felt like my insides had turned into broken glass. I couldn't sleep that night, lying on the couch as far from her as possible, my thoughts replaying every moment of betrayal. I realized the marriage was over. There was no saving it. But if she thought she could walk all over me without any consequences, she was wrong. I had been a devoted husband, faithful to the core, and this is how she repaid me. The more I thought about it, the clearer it became. I would make her regret everything she had done. The next day, as Ava buzzed around the house prepping for her special weekend, I began planning. I wasn't going to plead with her. I wasn't going to shout or beg. I wanted her to feel the pain, the cold, inevitable pain, the way I felt it in my bones. I spent that entire Friday scheming. I bought new locks for the house and contacted a locksmith to come and change them Saturday afternoon. That night, as I sat quietly watching her pack her suitcase, her eyes gleaming with excitement, I was recording every word, every reckless boast of how liberated she felt. I wanted evidence, not only for the divorce but to make sure she would never twist the narrative against me. Her enthusiasm was almost revolting, like she was a schoolgirl sneaking out for a secret crush. I couldn't believe this was the woman I had pledged my life to. Before she went to sleep, she kissed me lightly on the cheek, murmuring, "I love you, Nathan. I promise you'll see. This will make everything better." She turned around, swaying her hips, oblivious to the storm she had just unleashed. Saturday morning, she left in a rush. I watched from the window as Eric's black car pulled into our driveway. She stepped out in a tight red dress that matched the lipstick she was wearing. She blew me a kiss before getting into the car. I didn't move from the window until they disappeared down the street. The locksmith arrived soon after, and by noon the locks had been changed. Ava had officially locked herself out of my life. I removed her name from our door's nameplate and dropped all her belongings into black trash bags, piling them up in the garage. By the time evening rolled around, I felt hollow and strangely calm. That night, I didn't go out with Kevin. I wanted to be alone. Just me and the house that now bore my name, alone. I watched some TV, trying to drown out the images in my head of what Ava was doing. The betrayal growing deeper with every passing hour. Ava returned the following evening, her hair messy, eyes puffy, and that same red dress wrinkled from the trip. She knocked on the door at first. And then, when her key didn't fit, she started banging, calling my name repeatedly. I sat inside for a moment watching her on the security camera. Her eyes went wide as she realized she had been shut out. She looked scared in a way I hadn't seen in years. "What the hell, Nathan?" she screamed, pounding at the door. I finally decided it was time I opened the door and faced her. Her eyes were wild, red from crying. She looked less like the woman I knew and more like a stranger, someone foolish and desperate. "Why are you doing this?" she sobbed, trying to push past me to get inside. I stood firm, blocking her way. I told her, "You wanted excitement, Ava. Here it is. Your life as you knew it is over. This is what you wanted, isn't it?" She pleaded with me, tears streaming down her face, the cold winter air making her shiver. I tossed her a phone recording of her boasting about her exciting weekend plans. Her face went pale as she realized I had recorded her. "You destroyed us, Ava, and now you'll get to live with the consequences," I told her coldly. She screamed about how she was sorry, how Eric had forced her, but it didn't matter to me. She had left willingly, and she had returned expecting me to forgive and forget. I pointed to her bags in the garage and told her to take them and leave. "You wanted adventure. How about navigating life on your own?" I added as I slammed the door shut. She stayed in the driveway for a long time, probably hoping I'd relent, but I didn't. The divorce papers would be served soon, and there was no way I was letting her back in. The weeks that followed Ava's dramatic eviction from our house were like watching the aftermath of a storm. I filed the divorce papers and instructed my lawyer to have them delivered to her parents' home, since she had nowhere else to go. She'd been staying with her childhood friend Julia, who probably didn't even know half of the story. But Ava wasn't just sitting back quietly. She reached out to me repeatedly, texts, calls, voicemails, each one more desperate than the last. She even had her mother call me, crying, begging me to give her another chance. But there was nothing left between us, just a gaping wound. I wanted nothing more than to close it for good. Every time Ava called, I remembered her carefree laugh as she packed for her weekend with Eric, her confidence in how strong our marriage was, her dismissiveness when I begged her not to go. Those memories were like acid in my chest, eating away at me, and they were what kept me resolute. She had betrayed me, betrayed us. There was no coming back from that. I knew her next move before she even tried it. Ava showed up at my office one Wednesday afternoon. I was sitting at my desk, flipping through reports, when I heard the commotion outside. The secretary's voice followed by Ava's pleading, "Just let me talk to him, please." I stepped outside to find her disheveled and holding the divorce papers in her hands, her eyes swollen from crying. I could see she was on the brink of falling apart. My colleagues all looked on awkwardly as I pulled Ava into a side room. "What do you want, Ava?" I asked coldly, crossing my arms. She thrust the divorce papers toward me. "I won't sign them, Nathan. I can't do this. I love you. Please, let's talk. We can fix this." I stared at her. The woman standing in front of me was a shadow of her former self. There was no more arrogance, no more thrill-seeking bravado. She looked hollow, desperate. "We have nothing to talk about," I replied. "You already made your choices, Ava. Now you get to live with them." Tears welled in her eyes, and her voice shook. "It was a mistake, Nathan. I thought it would be exciting, but it was a nightmare. I was stupid. I love you. You're the only person I ever wanted. I felt my fists clench. You thought you could play with fire and then come back as if nothing happened. You think I can just forget what you did? She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. I've already given you your answer, I said, before walking out and leaving her standing alone. My heart felt heavy, but I knew what I had to do to finally end this nightmare. After her dramatic office visit, Ava stopped contacting me for a while. I'd heard from a mutual friend that she had started therapy, which was probably the first genuinely positive step she'd taken since all of this started. But even as she seemed to be getting herself together, I wasn't done. I needed more than just her signature on the divorce papers. I needed closure. I wanted her to understand just how deeply her betrayal had cut me. That's when I decided to send her one last message, one that would leave no room for misunderstanding. A month after our confrontation at my office, I arranged the record of Ava and Eric's romantic escapade, proof of every reservation, every sordid detail that she had previously tried to downplay. It was less about needing evidence for court and more about making sure Ava saw everything from my perspective, laid out before her like an open wound. After collecting every detail of her affair, I created a timeline, a painful, meticulous document of her deceit. I had it delivered to Ava's parents' house with a short note. This is why I can never come back. This is why it's over. The next morning, Ava called me. I ignored the call, but this time she left a message. Her voice was barely a whisper, and I could hear the pain in her words. I got your package, she began. There was a long pause. I could hear her taking deep breaths, trying to hold herself together. I understand now, Nathan. I know what I did to you. I know how deeply I hurt you. I know I can never undo that. I wanted excitement, but all I did was destroy the most meaningful thing I ever had. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. I sat back, my phone still in my hand, feeling an odd sense of relief. Finally, she knew there was no excuse, no attempt to justify her actions, just an understanding that she had broken something irreplaceable. I knew I could start to heal now that the divorce was finalized, quietly a few weeks later. There were no dramatic scenes, no arguments. Ava signed the papers, and that was it. She moved back in with her parents, and I stayed in the house, my house now, with her name erased from every part of it. It was strange being alone, but in many ways it felt like a relief. The quietness of the empty house wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. I no longer had to fear coming home, no longer had to wonder what new torment awaited me. I poured my energy into myself, something I hadn't done in a long time. I hit the gym regularly, picked up hiking and started painting again, a hobby I had abandoned years ago. Kevin remained my rock through all of it, pushing me to keep going when I felt like I had nothing left. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again. Ava tried reaching out once more, sending a letter apologizing again, telling me about how she was trying to make something of her life. But I didn't reply. It was enough for me that she knew the depth of her betrayal. She had her own journey now, one that didn't intersect with mine anymore. Months passed, the seasons changed, and so did I. I was no longer that shattered man sitting on the couch while his wife dressed up for another man. I was different now, stronger, perhaps even wiser. I had discovered that no matter how dark things seemed, I could always pull myself back into the light. One day, while out hiking with Kevin, we ran into a group of people. Among them was a woman named Emily. Friendly, easygoing, with a smile that made me forget the weight I'd been carrying for so long. She joined us on our hike that day, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I found myself smiling genuinely. Smiling when we began talking, and one thing led to another. Before I knew it, I had asked her out for coffee. It wasn't love at first sight, but it was something real, something pure. And as I spent more time with Emily, I began to understand that love wasn't about grand gestures or dramatic fights. It was about showing up, being there, and respecting each other every single day. And that's where Nathan's story ends, for now. Ava made her choices, and she paid dearly for them. Nathan, instead of wallowing in the pain of betrayal, took control of his life and found a way to move on. Will Emily be his happily ever after? Only time will tell. But one thing's for sure, Nathan has learned that no matter how hard the fall, it's always possible to rise again.